Let's review where we are. In yesterday's DAF on Lamed Vav, there was a Mishnah. The Mishnah seems to be holding of a principle called Breira. Breira is the principle whereby you can create a halachic reality retroactively. So a person puts down two parcels of food, one to the east and one to the west, and he says to himself, well, you know what, I'll decide tomorrow which direction I want to go and which ERU will be the active ERU and which parcel will not be the ERU. And we saw an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, and Rabbi Yehuda seems to be saying that, at least according to we saw a Brisa according to Rabbi Yehuda, and this Brisa seems to maintain that according to Rabbi Yehuda, that there is no Breira. Because the Brisa that was taught by Ayo, which was the name of a Chacham, that a person cannot decide on Shabbos retroactively which one is the ERU. Rabbi Yehuda says, the way that it was explained yesterday in the Gemara, is that only you can put down two parcels of food, one in the east and one in the west, and not know which one is an ERU, but before Shabbos comes in, it has to be determined which one is the ERU, even if you're not aware of it, which means you basically say, I know that there's going to be a Talmud Chacham coming to give a drasha. I'm not sure whether he's coming from the east or coming from the west, and I'm going to have to extend my boundaries one way or the other. So whichever area he's in, that's where I want the ERU to take effect. And as long as the Chacham is there from before Shabbos, then the ERU takes effect. So it's not retroactive, it's just that there's a lack of knowledge that will be verified later on. But according to that Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of Breira. So the Gemara then had said that this is also supported by the fact that we have another Mishnah or Brisa which talks about a person who purchases wine from a kusi who has not tithed his wine, and it's right before Shabbos, and I want to be able to drink the wine, and I don't have the opportunity to tithe it before Shabbos. According to Reb Meir, I am permitted to go ahead and drink the wine and leave over a certain amount of it, and say that after Shabbos, I'll retroactively designate that this was the wine that was already always designated as the tithe. Meaning that even though I had no idea which wine, when you're dealing with fluid, it's all mixed together. So there's no way of knowing which fluid is going to be left over that's going to be my truma, but I can designate it as a retroactively taking effect, that even when I drank the wine on Shabbos, retroactively whatever was left over was the designated truma. But it seems like Reb Yehuda and Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon say that it's Asur, and that indicates that Reb Yehuda does not hold of Breira. Comes along Ula, and then he says that no, that really Reb Yehuda does hold of Breira, because of, our Mishnah supports the fact that Reb Yehuda holds of Breira. And as far as that Brisa of Ayo, which seems to indicate that Reb Yehuda doesn't hold of Breira, well, that Brisa is contradicted by our Mishnah. And furthermore, the case of the wine, where it seems like Reb Yehuda is taking the side of those Tanoim who don't hold of Breira and say that it's usher to drink the wine, Rabbi Yehuda really aligns himself with Reb Meir. So we have four Tanoim in that Brisa. Reb Yehuda and Reb Meir hold that you can use that retroactivity to drink the wine, and therefore whatever is left over is the retroactive designated truma. And according to Reb Shimon and Reb Yossi, they're the ones who don't hold of Breira, and they say that you cannot drink the wine. So I want to make sure that that's where you left off with yesterday with Rabbi Torchiner, that we're at a point now where we've seen this machlokus. There are four Tanoim in this Brisa, or this Mishnah, where two, Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda, say that we hold of Breira, and therefore we let you drink the wine. And you'll just leave over a little bit of the wine, and so that after Shabbos, that'll be your designated truma. And according to Reb Shimon and Reb Yossi, you're not allowed to drink the wine because they don't hold of the concept of Breira. That's where we're up to. So now the Gemara says, Visavar, it's right in the middle. Visavar Reb Yossi ein Breira, question mark. Now, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon are the ones who say that you cannot drink the wine. You mean to tell me that Rabbi Yossi does not hold of Breira? Behotzanan. But look at the following Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi Omer Shtei Nashim Shalakchu Es Kinehen Be'eruv O Shenasnu Kinehen L'Kohen Eze Sheyirtze Kohen Yakriv Ola Ula Eze Sheyirtze Yakriv Chatas. That there's the following halacha that is stated by Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, thank you so much. When you have two women, that have just given birth and they have to bring their, like the Torah has said in this last week's parsha, that there's a requirement for atonement. When a woman has just given birth, she has to bring two birds as a korban. One is a korban chatas and one is a korban olah. We just read it in Parshas Tazria. In any event, women like to do things together. They like to go shopping together. They like to go to the Beis HaMikdash together. So these two ladies that have just given birth, they say, you know what? We'll buy our birds together. We'll give them to the Kohen together. And let the Kohen decide which birds are Rachel's, which birds are Leah's. We'll let the Kohen decide which bird, basically the Mishnah says that the Kohen is able to decide which one is which. Even if, normally when you buy birds, you buy them in pairs. So Rachel pays for her pair of birds, and Leah pays for her pair of birds. But they get mixed up because the ladies, they don't care. They just give all four birds to the Kohen. The Kohen can decide which one is Rachel's, which one is Leah's, and furthermore, he can decide which of the two birds that are for Rachel is which one is the Chatas and which one is for the Olah. Now, that would only work if you hold of Breira, that retroactively, when they bought them, they were pre-designated as that, because since the women had nothing in mind, so the Kohen can retroactively say that this was always Rachel's bird and this was always Leah's bird. If you don't hold of retroactivity, so then they're really partners on each one of the birds, and the carbon won't work. So the Gemara says, so you see here that Rabbi Yossi holds of Breira. Amar Rabba Hasam Kishehisna. The Gemara says no. There, it's where the women explicitly said, you know what? We're not going to be Kona. Neither of us will have a kinyan on these birds until we actually give it to the Kohen. And then the Kohen will make the kinyan for us, and he'll designate which one is the Chatas and which one is the Olah. So in that situation, you don't really need to rely on Breira. Breira is only where you need to retroactively reassign something. But over here, the women have suspended all designations and all acquisitions. And therefore, they're letting the Kohen, at the moment, in real time, make the designation of who owns what and what each bird is for. So that's not using Breira. So the Gemara says, Ihachi Maila Memra. If that's the case, then what was the whole point of this, of Rabbi Yossi's, it's almost like saying Pshita, then obviously if they suspended all possession and all designation, then obviously it works. What's the Chiddush of Rabbi Yossi? Kamash Malan Kida Rab Chizda. The answer is like Rab Chizda says, the Amar Rab Chizda, Ein Hakinin Misparshos, Ela Ibila Kichas Ba'olim Iba Asiyas Kohen. The answer is that Rab Chizda learns from the Psukim that the only time a designation of the birds works is either at the time of the purchase of the birds or at the time of the presentation or the action of the Kohen to actually do the avoda. Now what this means is, the way Rashi explains is Rabbi Yossi is telling us a chiddush. Let's say that when the women buy the birds, they make that stipulation that, you know what, we're not taking possession yet, we're not designating which bird is Chatas, which bird is Ola, which bird is Rachel's, which bird is Leah. We're going to let the Kohen decide. Let's say after they already purchased the birds, they change their mind and they say, guess what? These two birds will be yours, these two birds will be mine, and then they give it to the Kohen and it's a whole mishmash. The chiddush is that even though they try to designate the birds in between the time of purchase and the time of presentation to the Kohen, that designation is completely ineffective. That's the chiddush of Rabbi Yossi, because he learns from the pasuk that the designation only takes effect either at the time of purchase or at the time of presentation to the Kohen. So if they try to designate it in between, the chiddush of Rabbi Yossi is that it still works, because the Kohen can say what your designation was completely null and void because it wasn't done at the time of purchase. That's the chiddush of Rabbi Yossi. But at this point, we're still maintaining that according to Rabbi Yossi, there is no breira. So now the Gemara says, but wait a minute, ve'akati sava Rabbi Yossi ain breira. But let me present you with another brisa. Ve'hatanya am haaretz sha'amar l'chaver Kach li aguda echas shel yerko gluska echas, eno tzarech la'aser divrei Rabbi Yossi, v'chachamim omrim tzarech la'aser. We have the brayso that states as follows. You have an am ha'aretz and a chaver, a person who's illiterate and a person who's a Talmud Chacham, and they're friends. They're friends with each other. So the chaver says to the am ha'aretz, his friend, you know what, I'm going shopping. Do you need anything from the store? And the am ha'aretz says to him, you know what, Taka, I could use a bunch of vegetables or a loaf of bread. Would you mind buying one for me? So the chaver says, no, I'm going to buy one for myself. I'll just buy two. Fine. The halacha now is that when he gets home, this chaver, and he's got 2 loaves of bread, he is not obligated to tithe the bread before he gives it to his friend the am ha'aretz. Now let's just give the background information here. Where is the chaver buying the bread from? He's buying it from another am ha'aretz, who's the merchant in the marketplace. What is the status of the bread that the merchant sells to him? It's demai. So the chaver, if he's buying it for himself, he has to tithe. He has to tithe meiser sheni. He has to tithe trumas meiser. He has to take certain additional tithes. Does he have to do it for the loaf of bread that he's giving to the am ha'aretz? Well, that's the chiddush. According to Rabbi Yossi, he doesn't have to. And the Chachamim say he does have to. What's the machlokas? The Chachamim say that when you buy 2 loaves of bread, we don't know which one is yours and which one is the am ha'aretz's, right? And because you've purchased them both, so basically you're taking some level of possession of both loaves of bread, and therefore when you present the loaf of bread to the am ha'aretz, basically it's coming from you. It's not coming from the merchant. It's coming from you. And there's a halacha that an am ha'aretz, that a chaver rather, is not allowed to give a gift to an am ha'aretz if it's untithed, because there's the problem of lifnei iver. So if the loaf of bread belongs to the chaver, when he presents it to the am ha'aretz, his friend, he's going to have to tithe it first. And the Chachamim say, since there's no way of knowing which loaf of bread is whose, so it could be that this loaf of bread that he's presenting to the am ha'aretz is switched for his loaf, and if because of that exchange, and he's giving the loaf that he has some level of possession of to the am ha'aretz, he's got to tithe it before he gives it to the am ha'aretz. Rabbi Yossi disagrees, and Rabbi Yossi says, no, we use breira to tell us that whichever loaf he actually presents to the am ha'aretz is the one that he didn't purchase. In other words, the very fact that he's giving it over to his friend the am ha'aretz is proof that retroactively when he purchased it with the am ha'aretz's money, and that therefore he never took possession of it, and therefore he doesn't have to tithe it. So therefore, the only way that Rabbi Yossi can hold that the chaver does not have to tithe the bread before he presents it to his friend the am ha'aretz is if he holds to the principle of breira.
What does Rabbi Yossi do with lifnei iver? I mean, it's still lifnei iver, even if we have this whole mechanism.
You're only over on lifnei iver if you're involved in the if you've made a kinyan, if you're giving him something. Now it could be that there's another imperative, which is lo samad al dam re'echa, right? But you know that since demai is only a rabbinic requirement, so the chaver can say to himself, "Midiraisa, we can assume that it was time." So it's not a real lifnei iver. It's not a real lo samad. Okay, so the Gemara says, you see from here that Rabbi Yossi holds of breira, not like the case of the wine. So the Gemara answers, Epoch, you have to switch the positions. That really Rabbi Yossi is the one who says that it doesn't work, and that you do have to tithe, and the Chachamim are the one who say that you don't have to tithe. Tashma, listen to another brisa. Ha'omer, if a person says, Meiser sheyesh li bevesi mechulol al selo shetala biyodi min hakis. A guy says as follows, I have Meiser sheni produce that I have to bring up to Yerushalayim. I have it in my house. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pass the Kiddush of the Meiser sheni onto coinage. So I have a bag of coins. I say, I hereby declare that one of these coins in this bag is going to be the chilul coin, the exchange coin for my Meiser sheni. And I want it to take place right now, and whichever coin comes out of the bag first, that'll be the designated coin retroactively. So Rabbi Yossi Omer Mechulo, and Rabbi Yossi says it works. So you see, he holds up breira, he holds up retroactively, saying that the one that comes out now is the one that had been designated previously. So the Gemara says, Epoch Ema Rabbi Yossi Omer Lo Chilo. So the Gemara says, here too you have to switch the language, and you have to say that according to Rabbi Yossi, it doesn't work. Not that it works, but that it doesn't work. So the Gemara is saying, wait a minute, you're painted yourself into a corner here. You have three brises which were problematic. You had one brisa where Rabbi Yossi clearly says that he doesn't hold of breira. That was the case of the wine. But now you got two brises which indicate that Rabbi Yossi holds of breira. And you modified two brises in order to retain the text of the one brisa. Why don't you switch the one brisa to retain the text of the two brises? Wouldn't that make more sense? So the Gemara says, "Havadai ibchatanya." I'll tell you why. Because this last brisa, which was the case of the Meiser Sheni coin, that for sure the language is corrupted. That for sure we have to change the text and say that according to Rabbi Yossi, it doesn't work. Why? Because the Ketani Seifa, because the very next passage of that brisa says, "Umoder Rabbi Yossi ba'omer Meiser sheyesh li b'soch beisi yeh mechulol al sela chadasha shetala biyadi min akiz shechila." Because the second part of that brisa says that Rabbi Yossi admits that the following case will work. Now, what is the case? Where a person says the new coin that comes out of the bag is the one that will retroactively be the Meiser Sheni designee. Now, the fact that the Seifa says that Rabbi Yossi admits that this works implies that in the previous case Rabbi Yossi holds that it doesn't work. So therefore, the language of the brisa itself proves that we have to modify the first part and say that according to Rabbi Yossi it doesn't work. So now the Gemara says, well then let's analyze that second part. But the fact that he says in the second case that it works indicates that in the first case it doesn't work. So if now the Gemara says, Hai Sela Chadasha Heichidami. So let me ask you a question. What is the case taka of the case of the new coin? I di ikatarti plus the yesh breira hainu kamaisa. If the case of the new coin case is where he's got a bag full of new coins, and he basically says, I want one of these coins to be the Meiser Sheni coin, and whichever new coin comes out of the bag first will be retroactively the one that I want it to be that coin, then how is it any different from the first case? The first case was old coins, the second case is new coins, but in both cases you're relying on breira, retroactivity. So why should there be a difference? Why should Rabbi Yossi say in one case it doesn't work and in another case it does work? So ela deleka ela chada. So the answer is there's only one new coin. In the whole bag there's only one new coin. And basically you state as follows. I want the one new coin to act as my Meiser Sheni coin. There you're not relying on breira because there's only one coin. It's not that you have to wait for it to come out. So therefore there's no retroactivity here, and that's why Rabbi Yossi says that it works. So the Gemara then says, well then my tala. Why did you say, well, we'll wait for it to come out? If you already know that there's only one coin, then the language, the verbiage of the coin that comes out doesn't make any sense in the second case. The Gemara answers, I did Tani Reisha Tala, Tana Seifa Nami Tala. You're right. We should have used a different verb in the second case, but we want it to be consistent, because since the word Tala, the verb Tala was used in the first case, we used the verb Tala in the second case, but really, in reality, you're not waiting for the coin to come out, because you already know which coin it is. Amarle Rava Rav Nachman, Man Haitana Dafilu B'Derabanan Lesle Breira. Rabbi asked Rav Nachman the following question. I'm going to quote for you now a brisa, and I want to know who the author of this brisa is, because the author of this brisa seems to hold that we don't utilize the principle of breira even by rabbinic law, even when it comes to rabbinic law. So who is the author of that brisa? Detanya. What's the case? Amar lachamisha. A man says to 5 people. He says to 5 different people, Hareini ma'arev al eza mikem she'erza, ratzisi yelech, lo ratzisi lo yelech. So a guy says to 5 guys, he goes over to 5 of his friends and he says, you know what? I'm going to be putting down a parcel of food to make an erev tchumen, but I haven't decided which one of my friends it's going to work for. So tomorrow morning, I'll let you know, I'll decide which one of my friends I've decided that this food parcel should be given to. So that just in case one of you guys needs to travel outside the tchum, I'll make it work for one of you. I haven't decided yet. So ratzami ba'ojo meruvo eruv mishachashecha ene ruvo eruv. So the halacha is as follows, says the brisa. If the fellow decides before Shabbos starts which one of his friends the Erev should work for, so then it's a valid Erev for that friend. If, however, he waits until Shabbos has already come in, he waits until Shabbos morning, and then he makes up his mind, so then the Erev is not a valid Erev. So obviously the Tan of this Brisa doesn't hold of Breira, even when it comes to Eruvei Tchumen. So you see that even when it comes to rabbinic law, like Eruvei Tchumen, he doesn't hold of Breira. So Rabbi asked Rav Nachman, who is this Tana like? So Ishtik v'lo Amar le v'lo Midi. He didn't have an answer. He didn't have an answer who the author of the Brisa was. V'leima le Tana devei Ayo. Why didn't he tell him? It's just the Brisa of Ayo that we saw yesterday, where Ayo quotes Rabbi Yehuda as saying that Breira doesn't work even by Eruvei Tchumen. The Gemara answers, Hu lo shami alei, because Rav Nachman had never heard the Brisa of Ayo. Plain and simple. A lot of times the rabbis, Brisas were circulated orally, and sometimes you knew it, and sometimes you didn't know it. Sometimes you had heard it, sometimes you didn't hear it. So Rav Nachman was not familiar with that opinion. Rav Yosef Omar, Tanoi Shaklas Me Alma, Tanoihi. So Rav Yosef says, it's very simple. This whole concept of whether or not we say Breira by Eruvei Tchumen, which is purely rabbinic law, is not just Tanoi Shaklas Me Alma. You're not pulling it out of thin air. We have a brisa that indicates that it's a machlokas Tanoim. That the Tanya, as the brisa says, Hareini ma'ariv l'shabaso shel kol hashana, ratzisi elech lo ratzisi lo elech. So the brisa states as follows: that if a person says, very similar to the previous case where he's making an error for one of his 5 friends. Here he's making an error for himself, but he wants to put the food in a tin and keep it in a preserved area outside the city. And he basically says as follows: I'm going to keep this tin of food for an entire year. It's going to remain outside the city. And every Shabbos I'll decide whether I want it to be my Erev or not. Some Shabbosos, it may very well be that I don't need to travel outside beyond the city limits, and I'll want it that it should not be an Erev, and that way I'll have 2,000 Amos in all directions. Other times, I'll want it to be an Erev because I'll want to limit myself in the south so that I can extend my borders to the north. But I'll decide every Shabbos whether I want it to be an Erev or not. So the Brisa says, Ratzami ba'ojo meruvo Erev mishachashecha, that if you make the decision before Shabbos enters, so then everyone agrees that the Erev is a valid Erev. If, however, you make your decision only after Shabbos has already started, so there you have a machlokas. Rabbi Shimon Omer Eruvo Eruv, Chachamim Omrim Ein Eruvo Eruv. That Rabbi Shimon says that you can say that it's an Erev retroactively, that apparently Rabbi Shimon holds of Breira, and the Chachamim say it's not an Erev, they don't hold of Breira. So basically Rav Yosef is answering Rav's question. Rav has said, where do you see a Tana that holds that you don't hold of Breira even by a Ravin, which is Derabanan? The answer is, says Rav Yosef, it's a machlokas Tanoim. Rav Shimon says you do say Breira, and the Chachamim say you don't say Breira. So now the Gemara asks the question, V'hashaminan lo Rabbi Shimon de lesle Breira. Kasha the Rav Shimon or the Rav Shimon. So now, then comes along Rav Yosef and follows up, and he says, but wait a minute. Didn't we learn previously that Rav Shimon was one of the 4 Tanoim with the case of the wine? Rav Shimon was the one who sided with Rav Yossi and said that you cannot drink the wine because we don't hold of the retroactive truma taking. So how can it be that by the case of the wine, Rav Shimon doesn't hold of Breira, and by the case of Eruvei Tchumen, Rav Shimon says that you can rely on Breira? Ella Epoch. So the Gemara says you have to switch the positions and say that Rav Shimon is the one who doesn't hold of that it works, and the Chachamim say that it works even retroactively. But the Gemara says, but why Rav Yosef do you have to say that? My kasha. Dilma ki lesle le Rav Shimon bereira b'diraisa, avol b'dirabanan islay. Maybe I'll give you a very simple answer. Rav Shimon sometimes holds of Breira, sometimes doesn't hold of Breira. When it comes to Torah law, like taking Trumas and Meisers, then Rav Shimon says you can't rely on Breira. But when it comes to rabbinic law, like deciding whether something's going to be an Erev retroactively, there Rav Shimon holds that you can rely on Breira. Answers the Gemara, Kasava Rav Yosef, Mandi Islay Breira, Loshna B'diraisa, Loshna B'dirabbanan. Islay. Manda Leslay Breira, Loshna B'diraisa, Loshna B'dirabbanan. Leslay. The answer is because Rav Yosef is of the opinion that you can't have it both ways. You either hold of Breira across the board, or you don't hold a breira across the board. If you hold that breira works, and it's going to work both by Torah laws and it's going to work by rabbinic laws. If you hold that breira doesn't work, then it makes no difference whether it's Torah law or rabbinic law. It never works. And that's why Rav Yosef concluded that you have to take the brisa and switch the opinions in order for Reb Shimon to remain consistent with himself. Yeah.
Rabbi, when you say to switch the positions, I'm a little confused. Are we talking about switching because we just don't know the authorship of the brisa?
Well, we're saying,
or we don't know we don't actually know the full text of the brisa.
See, a brisa is an oral text.
Right.
Okay, and a lot of times the Gemara will tell you that the text was quoted inaccurately, and that the opinions were quoted in the opposite. And so the Gemara says, based upon certain compelling argumentation, you have to switch the authorship of the brisa and say that this is the correct authorship of the brisa. Okay?
Okay, sure.
Now, Rava Amar. So now Rava says, I have a totally different approach to how you can reconcile the fact that when the case of the wine, Reb Shimon says that breira doesn't work, but in the case of the ERU, Reb Shimon says that it does work. You don't have to switch the opinions. No, Reb Shimon is not inconsistent. Why? Because Shiny Hasam Divo'inan Reishis Sheshireha Nikarim. Taking Trumas and Maasros is a special case. Normally, according to Reb Shimon, you do say breira. You know why it doesn't work in the case of the wine? Why can't a guy drink the wine and then after the fact designate that the leftovers is truma? Is because when the Torah talks about the law of truma, it designates it as reishis degancha. Reishis means that it is the first and that it is discrete and identifiable. That's the way Rashi explains the word reishis. It has to be discrete and identifiable in order for it to be valid. And therefore, you can't designate something as truma if it's non-identifiable, if it's non-discrete, discrete, non-discrete, meaning that it's not a solid mass that you can look at and say that's the truma. Okay? If it's nebulous because you're in the middle of drinking and only after the fact whatever's left over will be truma, so then even now it cannot be truma. At this point it cannot be truma, and that's why it doesn't work. Not because we don't hold of breira. Really, we do hold of breira. Retroactivity is a principle that is in effect according to Reb Shimon, but in this particular case of truma, retroactivity doesn't work when the truma cannot be identified at this moment. That's the reason why. So now, the Gemara now says, but wait a minute. Amalei Abaya Elameata. So Abaya says, according to what you're arguing, Rava, let me ask you a following what-if question. Hayulafan of Shnei Rimonim Shel Tevel. A guy has two pomegranates in front of him, both are tevel. Va'omar, im yerdu geshamim hayom yehizeh truma al zeh, v'im lo yerdu geshamim hayom yehizeh truma al zeh. Hachanami ben yardu ben lo yardu dein b'dvar of klon. So Abaye says, let me ask you the what-if case. Guy's got two pomegranates, the pomegranate on the right, the pomegranate on the left. And he makes the following bizarre conditional statement. He says, if it rains today, then I want the pomegranate on the right to be truma for the pomegranate on the left. And if it doesn't rain today, I want the pomegranate on the left to be truma for the pomegranate on the right. According to you, Rava, since the truma must be readily identifiable at the moment when I'm tithing, so then according to you, this should not work because I can't right now identify which pomegranate is the truma pomegranate. Is that what you're suggesting, Rava? B'chi tema hachanami, and if you're going to tell me that that's taka what you hold, but let me show you a Mishnah. V'hatznan trumas hakri hazeh u'masrosav b'salcho or trumas meiser zeh b'salcho. That if a person says as follows, he's got a pile of grain that has not yet been tithed. It's totally tevel, and he says, you know what? I hereby declare that the center of this pile shall be heretofore be the truma and the meiser for the rest of the pile, the center. Okay? Or if he says he's got a pile of meiser grain, because he's a Levi, and he says the center of this pile of grain shall be trumas meiser. So in that case, Reb Shimon Omer Kara Hashem. Reb Shimon says it works. But the truma is not readily identifiable, so why should it work according to you, Rava? Rava answers, Shiny Hasam De'ika Sivivav. The answer is because Lamaisa, there is a discrete place where we know the truma is. He's declared that the center of this pile shall act as the truma. So even though I don't see it because it's in the middle, but at least I know where it is. It's in one discrete and identifiable location. Contrast to the case of wine, where right now when I'm drinking it, I don't know which liquid is going to be left over at the end of my drinking. To say I know for sure where the truma is. Here at least I know where the truma is, even if I can't see it right now.
Where would he take it from, Lamaisa?
Well, so that's not something that's taken up by the Gemara. The point is that if a person were to drill a hole into the pile and then eat a nibble on some of the truma, and he's not a Kohen, he'd get malchus for it. Whereas that would not be the case if it was mamish tevel. We're just saying that the truma works, or if he's tamei and he touches it, he'd get malchus. Anyway, v'i bayasema, I'll give you another answer how to explain Reb Shimon. You know why Reb Shimon is not inconsistent? Even though Reb Shimon says by the wine, Breira doesn't work, and over here by Eruvin, Breira does work, I'll give you another answer. Kidikatani taima, amrulo, because there's a brisa that explains the reasoning of Reb Shimon and Reb Yossi as to why you can't drink the wine. There, amrulo, Reb Meir, they said to Reb Meir, what was the argument? The argument was not that we don't hold of Breira. The argument is, Reb Meir, how can you take that risk? What happens if you drink 80% of the wine and 20% is left over, and before Shabbos is over, before you have a chance to designate that remaining wine as your Trumas and Maasros, the flask bursts and all of the wine leaks out? Then it turns out that retroactively there's no more Truma and Maasro that you can take, and you drank Tevel. That's why we hold it doesn't work. Not because we don't hold of Breira, we hold of Breira. But we don't believe in taking risks. And because there's a risk that the flask will break, that's why we don't permit it. So Amar Lahen Licha Sheyiboka. So Reb Meir's response to them is, when it breaks, we'll worry about it. In other words, Reb Meir says it's acceptable risk. That's really what Reb Meir said. It's such a unlikely scenario that the flask is going to break before I'm ready to take Trumas and Maasros. If it breaks, we'll worry about it then.
But even if it did break, so what? I mean, he designated it as Truma. Okay, so the Truma went. Oh, it doesn't go to the Kohen. It has to go to.
No, it only becomes Truma after Shabbos. You're not allowed to take Trumas and Maasros on Shabbos. So no. Once you have leftover wine and Shabbos is over, you say that this leftover wine retroactively is my Truma. So it only works once you finish drinking. Once you finish drinking, whatever's left over retroactively is Truma. What happens if, by the time you finish drinking, at that moment the flask breaks and everything leaks out? And
before Shabbos is over.
Yeah, even before Shabbos is over, right? And everything leaks out, and now there is no Truma anymore. There's no Trumas and Maasros left for you to be able to declare as Truma retroactively. So that's
what happens to our two pomegranates, by the way? I wonder. That example seemed like not a very strong challenge, because it's very clearly contradistinct to wine that's all mixed up. You got these separate pieces of fruit here, but he didn't follow up with it at all. I mean, it's not. It really wasn't much of a challenge.
Well, Rava seems to be of the opinion that it doesn't work, since you haven't clearly designated which pomegranate is your thing. But by the way, this is a machlokas. Now we're falling off of that, and we're saying no.
Yeah, okay.
That's not the reason why Reb Shimon holds it doesn't work. Not because it has to be discreet, but rather because he's worried about the risk of l'shema yibaka anod. The flask will break. So now the Gemara says, just to finish off, Ulamai desalak adaitin meikara, deboina rashis shashireha nikarin maika amrlay. Now let's go back to our original answer. Our original answer was that the reason why Reb Shimon holds that the wine case you're not allowed to drink is because there the truma has not yet been clearly identified. If that's what you were thinking, then how did you understand this part of the brisa which says that Reb Shimon's concern is not that the truma is not discrete and identifiable, but rather his concern is that even if you hold of breira, maybe the flask will break before you finish drinking, in which case it will turn out that you drank tevel. You see clearly that his concern was not about discreteness, but rather was about the flask breaking. So how would you reconcile that with your argument, Rava, that the issue for Reb Shimon is that the truma has to be discrete and identifiable? So therefore, hachi ka'amri lei. The answer is that the way you'd understand that part of the Bryce is that what they were saying to Reb Meir is as follows: Lidi dan bo'inin reisha sheshirei anikarim. That we hold that the primary reason why you can't drink the wine is because the truma is not discrete and identifiable. But according to you, Reb Meir, who doesn't require that, because obviously you hold that you can apply brera here and you can drink the wine, even though the truma is not discrete. But you should have a secondary concern. What's the concern? Aren't you worried that the flask will break before you finish drinking, and therefore it turns out that everything was devil lamafreya? And on that, Omer lahen l'cheshe yibaka. And that's where Reb Meir said, I'm not worried. Not only do I not hold that the truma has to be discrete, but I'm not worried about the risk that the flask is going to break. And that's the way that Rava would interpret the Brisa, according to his explanation, that according to Reb Shimon, the issue is that the truma is non-discrete. Okay, it's a lot of confusion here, very complicated stuff, but we got through it. So have a wonderful day.